Okay, here we go. Okay, thank you for your patience, everybody. Happy to be back here. I am sitting with Reverend Alex Chamberlain. Welcome, Alex. We're very glad to have you. Thanks for joining us and preparing a presentation today. We're looking forward to hear from you. So,
thank you.
Currently, adjunct professor at NNU.
Correct.
Yes. You mentioned you were retired, but not doing very well at the retirement.
Not well. I worked for Luke's for 20 years as a chaplain and then manager of clinical ethics. And I'm teaching clinical ethics now at NNU each semester to nursing majors, and got rehired by Luke. So I'm doing some flex chaplaincy on call.
Okay. All right. So, well, I guess if that's what retirement looks like, then we're just going to keep working through it. All right. Well, we'll let you get into, you're going to talk to us about integrating self-care into our healthcare careers.
Yes.
Self-care. I love it. All right. Thanks
Okay.
for being here.
Thank you.
Take it away.
And welcome to everybody who's hopefully staying awake as you've had content of various types. When they give me the power, I'll be starting to advance our slides. So I tend to not read slides because I'm assuming the vast majority of you are literate. But if I want to highlight something, I will certainly mention something. These are the learning objectives that I have in mind and that I hope we will get through successfully in the hour we have together. So I'm going to talk about when I was a student minister in graduate school. I woke up one morning and I took a deep breath and had a pain in my side. And I mentioned it to my roommate and he said, "You feel a little bit warm, maybe you should go to the infirmary." And I said, okay. So if I had a kind of a stabbing pain in my side with a deep breath and a light fever, those of you who are employed in healthcare, what's your out of the box diagnosis? Somebody in the room, maybe?
Appendicitis.
Right up here.
Kidney stones.
It was pneumonia. So they took an x-ray and confirmed that I was kind of cloudy over there. They said, "We're going to admit you and put you on IV antibiotics for a couple of days in the university infirmary." So I called a friend of mine and said, "Listen, I've got a test coming up in 3 days. I'm way behind in my Greek studies because I was training as a minister. I want you to bring my Greek New Testament and that book on theology that I'm working through. They're on the left of my desk. I can't really fall behind." So she came and brought me a Sports Illustrated and a Mad magazine and a crossword puzzle. And I said, "I'm going to fall behind." And she said, "You know, if you don't take care of yourself, you're going to be no good to anybody else. Study these." So she refused to buy into my wanting to keep work and study, even though I was quite sick. And what I took away from that was that I really couldn't afford to neglect my own care, or as she said, I wasn't going to be of any use to anybody. I want to read a brief selection from a book called On Living by Carrie Egan, who is a hospital chaplain. This is from her memoir. I'm trying to remember the page number, so I'm going to pull up my note. Which is hiding somewhere. And I'll get there. Here we go. Page 107. This hospice chaplain is talking to one of her patients in this gentleman's home. And they were talking about the pilgrims who came to the United States. And she says, "These pilgrims were tough people. I would have turned around and gone back. They were much tougher than me." And he cocked his head to the side and looked at me carefully. "You talk about being tough as though it's a good thing. I had to think for a second. Yes, I guess I do think it's a good thing. I guess I wish I was tougher. No, you don't. He looked away and waved his hand. I don't, I asked. No, toughness makes people mean. You're lucky you don't have to be tough. But toughness makes you strong. That's what I wish, that I was strong. You're so wrong. They're not the same thing, being tough and being strong. No? Nope, they're opposites. Well, how so? You have to be tough because you're not strong. That's how it works. I was tough because I didn't have a choice. It wasn't something I wanted. I'll tell you the truth. You're lucky if you don't have to be tough. You can stay who you really are. Nobody's born tough. Something makes you that way. Being tough makes you mean. It's better if you can stay kind. Nobody should want to be tough. When I first started working in hospice, someone told me this. In most of life, you can be weak inside and get through by putting on a tough outer shell. But if you work in hospice, you have to stay soft on the inside. So in order to you have to stay soft on the outside. So in order to stand up straight, you have to have a spine of steel. There's two ways to go through the world. Two ways to deal with loss that's inevitable in healthcare, with a hard shell or with a rock solid backbone. So I'm going to be talking about how we can hopefully avoid getting a hard shell and remaining strong in our inner core, in our spine. This whole day has been about healthcare, which of course includes the word care. And those of us who are caregivers recognize that's who we are, not so much what we do exactly, but it's a part of our very identity. And to be a caregiver, it's important to remember this first point. People often say, put the patient first. I believe that has to be flipped on its head. That your survival as a human being, it should be your first priority. That means you're well-rounded. You put your own needs first. You eat somewhat healthy. You have an age-appropriate level of fitness. And you make sure that your sense of balance and resilience is your highest priority. There's a lot of talks about burnout and compassion fatigue. I've looked through a lot of literature and presentations, and here are some common themes. So if a person is experiencing burnout, they have found that this common marker of you've lost your original passion is a common theme. Compassion fatigue has other markers: sleeplessness, low energy, irritability, and moral distress that you're not doing enough. It accumulates over time. It builds up that you have compassion fatigue. With burnout, you can become depleted pretty quickly. It might take days, weeks, or months, but compassion fatigue can take years or decades. Like metal can become brittle from long use, compassion fatigue may often show up later in a person's career. With healthcare, and as a chaplain, but other people obviously at the bedside, we're experiencing stressors that are different than those of the plumber or the salesman. We are constantly being reminded of our mortality. And it takes a certain amount of energy to be able to live in that world. And over time, being with people at turning points in their lives, you can be fatigued like that metal. and find that you no longer are able to function in the way you used to. There are a number of differences between compassion fatigue, therefore, and what we have in burnout. CF is also cystic fibrosis, but with compassion fatigue and other CF, you can't catch your breath. You just have these physical signs that you are completely worn out. With burnout, I'm now at the level of an animal. I've lost my humanity. With compassion fatigue, it's resignation. It's the nature of the beast, nothing I can do about it. So it isn't I have become the beast, it's the nature of my work. And that resignation can worry your soul. Burnout, this job stinks, and I can't catch my breath. So the conference headline is about self-care and a changing healthcare paradigm. And if you are initiating a paradigm, you see all the potential benefits, you see better ways of doing things, you have to sell this new concept to the people who are going to be implementing it. And you can see them beginning to embrace the changes. And as the one who initiated the changes, you don't have the risk that the people do who are having to put it into place. But if it isn't your brainchild, it can take a great deal of effort, more than a little time to adapt to another person's way of doing things. When I was a chaplain in New Zealand, which was a wonderful era in my life, there was a conference where, this was about 36 years ago, they were talking about charting, and the chaplains were now going to be expected to chart rather than simply offer our care to patients and families. We had to document and track what we were doing. Half the people there thought this was wonderful because we were being considered a part of the interdisciplinary team. The other half felt this is going to take time away from my patient care. I don't want to do it. And as we debated, an older, wiser leader in the organization said, you know, you shouldn't wait for the rug to be pulled out from under you. You have to learn to dance on a moving carpet. So change isn't something we necessarily want to avoid. It is something that is going to be a part of modern healthcare, and learning to dance on that moving carpet and adapt includes self-care. But even if you're doing a lot of things right that way, you may still feel that there's signs that you're susceptible to burnout or compassion fatigue. And the differences between them aren't really crucial, although I've mentioned some. The most important thing is you're finding that you don't enjoy the work or can't do the work anymore. So note that key distinction. One damn thing after another, that's life. And you need friends and people to support you. But if it's the same damn thing over and over again, that's neurotic. And that's when you need a professional. And so learn how to tap EAP or other resources with people who can help you, either from within your organization or outside of it. So do you think it's true that you really should make your own care a priority over that of your patients? I hope so. And you can learn to be smart, selfish. Since we're all made of matter, and because my training's in philosophy and theology, we're going to touch that. Since we're made of matter, we notice our own needs first. I don't know when the people in this room are thirsty or hungry, but I know when I am. So you automatically think, of yourself first. We are animals as well as higher beings spiritually. And when you're an animal, you think about eating, you think about your appetites, you eat more bacon than broccoli. And when our human side is operating for us, we can yield to those more base needs, or we can be reflective and be kind to our future self instead of what we want right now. So that means you save for your IRAs, you take a walk on the green belt, you dust off a bicycle, you learn to be smart, selfish, rather than be an animal. So it isn't a matter of being selfish or not, it's a matter of putting your own needs as a very, very high priority. That last line was offered by a professional athlete who's advocating for mental health support for athletes after he'd had a psychotic break and got the help he needed. So after acknowledging that our self-care should be our number one priority, here's point two: we'll engage in self-care in different ways. And how one does it is less important than what one does. So I want you in the chat to list ways in which you engage in self-care that have been instinctive. Maybe that you've had these habits for a long time. Maybe they were inculcated through your family of origin because your parents were runners or read a lot of fiction. What is in your past that you still do now that you do for yourself? So list some things if you would do so now. And if people in the room want to shout any out, I will say them aloud for the others as well.
Laugh.
Laughing.
Journal, read, walk.
Are they all able to hear that?
And you repeat it.
Okay, journal, reading, walking,
Coffee.
coffee,
Sleep.
sleep. But it's not just that you sleep, but you make it a priority. You may even read up on going to sleep at the same time, waking up at a similar time, not reading a screen that's electronic before you go to sleep. You make it a priority.
Family time.
Family time, definitely.
Self-care, exercise every day, read for pleasure, garden, cook for my family so that we can all eat together. Another comment, learning something new, and I have been taking a college course every semester in areas of art and fitness, currently in metalsmith and jewelry making class. And another comment, running, cooking a new recipe, prayer, meditative time daily. Not all at the same time.
Yes, not concurrently, but yeah, prayer, meditative time. I heard the jewelry making, and that gets to something new, something you've learned to do. Maybe it isn't a family habit, but something you've added to your repertoire. For me, humor was something in my family that I grew up with, but I was recently in therapy and talked to my therapist about I did something that was kind of stupid. And I said, what an idiot, what a wackadoodle I was. And she leaned forward with her furrowed brow and said, "You're not being very kind to yourself." And I laughed and said, "Yeah, but I'm just giving myself a kind of a verbal thwack on the head because I should know better. And I'm being playful with myself. I'm not being self-deprecating. I'm goofing around by saying, what an idiot. It's playful." She goes, "Okay, just as long as you don't really believe it." And I said, "Fine, it's just the way I am, that I will say those things to myself. What a jerk." Because that helps me take it lightly. So name an example of something you've done in the last 48 hours. And some people probably on that list can name something they've done, and think laterally. It's not just about physical exercise. You might say, I binge watched something on Netflix. That could be self-care rather than obsession. Well, not only obsession. Drink again with the coffee. So you slurp a pot of coffee every day, or you make a nice cup and savor it?
Maybe in between.
Maybe in between.
I watched Lord of the Rings last night.
Not all three,
No, but I have in the last 2 weeks watched all three of them.
all three of Lord of the Rings. And it can be fun to watch something that you know where it's going to go, and maybe you pick up new stuff, but it doesn't require a lot of you. Doesn't take a lot of horsepower. So
Lisa
that
said she called up a friend.
called up a friend. And you know, can also be selective about who's in your circle of friends. Some people are depleting, some people are energy in. So you can make good choices. Any other thoughts from participants? Okay, we'll keep moving then. The thing that I keep going back to is, oh, there's another.
Sorry, one more just came in. Heather said she painted her toenails bright red. Woo.
Does that indicate a particular symbolism, anything real deep, or just fun? Yeah. But anything that takes you away from the work mindset will help your self-care. So one thing to keep in mind, that humor is one universal means for taking yourself lightly and forming bonds with other people. So we're going to talk about humor, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Good humor connects people. I used to, on a pretty regular basis, make a salad to bring to work. And rather than put the dressing on it the night before when I made the salad and then bring it to work and eat it at noon, because if you do it that way, is it real edible? No, it's soggy. It's not. Did you all know this? You know, don't put the dressing on till right before consumption. It can change your life. So when I bring the salad to work, get breakfast, probably oatmeal. And when I'd go through the line, I would get a salad dressing, put it in my pocket. So every day I had a similar salad, but a different dressing. And after I had bought my salad dressing and put it in my pocket and was going to put it in the fridge, before I was able, I got paged to pediatrics. And they said, we could use a chaplain up here today. And so I went up, and there was an 11-year-old boy. He'd had his appendix ripped out during the night, well, surgically removed. And his parents had to go to work. And so he was all alone. And the nurse said he was really nervous, which makes sense. So I went in, introduced myself. I mentioned I'm a chaplain. I don't carry needles. You probably don't know what a chaplain is. You ever been to a church? And he goes, oh, I go to a Baptist church. So he was able to connect me with someone he knew. And I said, you look really tight. What's bothering you the most? He said, well, they took out my appendix and they say they're going to make me walk soon. And I said, and you're afraid when you stand up and walk, like your guts are going to fall out? And he goes, yeah. And I said, well, that only happens in like 1 out of 3. You know, the odds are really with you. And he didn't laugh. Yeah, I thought that humor missed the mark. He wasn't old enough to see what I was doing. And I said, what else is bothering you? And he said, well, they said they're going to change the bandage and have a new dressing put on. And I said, you've had Band-Aids taken off and you're afraid it's going to hurt because it might stick to the wound and everything. And he goes, yeah. And his eyes were misting up. And it came to me. And I said, when they come in to do the dressing change, put this under the sheets and say, you're darn right I want a dressing change. I'm sick of ranch. Give me Italian. And he looked at me and held out his hands. And so I relinquished my lunch, dressing. And he put it under the sheets. He wanted me to say a prayer with him. And he said, tell the nurse I have a question about my dressing. So I called the nurse in and I stood in the doorway and he said, He gave the whole line, the buildup, and he delivered the line like a pro as he threw the dressing down on the sheets. The nurse just about wet her pants. She was laughing so hard, and he swore her to secrecy so he could do it to the doctor, housekeeping, the CNA, everybody who came in the room. And the nurse told me later that when they actually did the dressing change, he was relaxed and laughing. So good humor that is healing isn't merely about applause. It's about helping people reframe something. And this poor little kid, he had power again. He is having things being done to him. Now he was doing things to others, including the surgeon. Learn to laugh sooner. Instead of saying, we'll laugh about this in 20 years, say, we'll laugh about this in 10 minutes. Learn to find humor in things that are unfolding in front of you. And remember that what might be funny at work might be too dark for those outside of healthcare. You ever experienced that? You know, you think it's hilarious, but home over the dinner table, it doesn't fly. Now, I don't know how many of you are actively involved in healthcare, so I'm kind of reluctant to share a joke now that healthcare people find amusing, but others don't. What percentage of our attendees are in healthcare? 100%. Okay. What's the worst part about getting a lung transplant? The first loogie you hawk up isn't yours. That's a good one to share at the dinner table. Now, my next slide might require our techs to press a play button for that clip. This is a woman who talked about how she's coping being a teacher during COVID. Let's see if it'll play for us. And they'll get the sound up maybe. Otherwise, it'll just lie there. And they're working on it.
We'll laugh about this in 5 minutes.
Yeah, we'll laugh about this in 5 minutes. And they're whispering and they're creative, and we'll see. Let's skip it. We got a bad echo. Yep. Good try. You can Google it instead. So we do need to be careful when laughing around doctors. Are there any doctors attending? Are there any? If there aren't any, let's make fun of doctors. Okay. What did the neurosurgeon use for birth control? His personality. Now, a neurosurgeon told me that one, if that helps. Here's a cartoon. I hope the font isn't too small, but I'll read them. We medical practitioners do our very best, Mr. Nyman. Nothing is more sacred to us than the doctor-plaintiff relationship. I'll have to x-ray your arm again. This one is overexposed. This patient has a very rare form of medical insurance. I'd say it's your gallbladder, but if you insist on a second opinion, I'll say kidneys. So if you don't have something funny happen to you at work, keep a collection of cartoons or have some videos or CDs or DVDs in storage that you can access when you've had one of those horribly draining days. And it's important you use what you're given. You'll find humor in everyday situations. I took a picture of this room that I just happened to walk by. Now, it says comfort room, and maybe because there's a TV there. But when I see stirrups, I think there's definitely a mixed message, especially when the table's facing away from the TV. So If you keep your eyes open throughout the day, in whatever healthcare setting you are, you will find that something funny is going to show up. You just have to have your eyes open to it. If possible, even if you're not in pediatrics, hang around children because they laugh easily and they don't need much initiation or prompting to be able to laugh, and that can be contagious. I remember a nurse telling me about being with a patient who'd had abdominal aortic aneurysm repair, and his granddaughter was there in the room, and the aunt said, "Would you like to see granddaddy's scar?" And she goes, "Yeah." So he lifted up his gown, this big angry red scar with all the stitches, and she was fascinated. And just then her parents called. The aunt and uncle were taking care of this little girl. And the parents called and said, "Did you see Grandpa?" He goes, "Yeah." And he's got a scar all the way from his chest to his vagina. So, everybody in the room died laughing because this kid was just being a kid. So be ready for things to surface for you. So that's the humor that's good, that's life-giving. Sometimes humor is bad. It can heal or it can hurt. We all know people who grew up in families where someone would make a dig and they would say, "I'm only kidding." That is humor that is not good. It can be harmful. Humor should be inclusive, not exclusive or alienating. If a new member of your team is at a table and somebody says, "Remember that thing that happened 3 years ago? That was hilarious." And you look around and this new person's there and somebody might say, "Oh, you had to be there." That's excluding them. Instead, you should say, "Oh, you weren't here yet. Let's tell you about it. This is what was going on." So humor shouldn't be "you had to be there." It should be "let's bring it back so you can be a part of this group and be welcomed rather than feel out of the loop." And when someone is confronted about an inappropriate use of humor, you can tell pretty quickly that if they apologize, the harm will be softened. But sometimes they'll deflect it or try and defend themselves. And if they feel they're on the spot, give people a break, because all of us have probably had times where we've used humor inappropriately. It's very difficult to recognize the line between making fun of people and circumstances that people don't find funny versus laughing at a situation. So if people are being hurt, we need to recognize that that's not going to be helpful at all. I remember going to a conference once of hospital chaplains, a national conference at a big conference center. And there was another group, and we shared the same common facilities in the bar and the restaurant. And they were a national funeral directors group. And you'd think chaplains and funeral directors, what a depressing, cross-pollination of careers. The laughter was just, I almost was crying, because we talked about families' reactions at death, that death isn't funny, but sometimes things around it can be hilarious, or at the graveside, things that go sideways, and how in these careers we can talk to each other and be safe because we understood the circumstances. Whereas outside of that situation, that humor would have been very, very bad. It's important to laugh at yourself. If you can laugh at yourself, you've always got material, because you're always there. I was at a party, and like guys do at parties, this guy said, "So what do you do?" And I said, well, I'm an ethicist. He goes, oh, yeah, is that like my wife? She's an esthetician. I said, well, your wife wants people to look good. I want people to be good. So we do have that overlap, but not exactly identical. And we laughed, and then I explained a bit more of my work, and his eyes glazed over, and then we changed the topic. If you make a mistake in attempting to employ humor, apologize. I have crossed a line that I didn't even know was there. When I was in my training, I went to my supervisor and said, I was with a family. I wasn't sure what to say. Can you give me some scripting or something that might have been more helpful? And he looked at me deadpan and said, just use your own poor judgment. And I smiled and I decoded that he was expressing confidence in me, obliquely, but I got the humor of what he was saying. And it was his way of saying, I'm not going to give you lines. You experiment and find out what works through repeatedly being with patients. Years later, I am mentoring a student in chaplaincy, and she asked me, what do I say to a family in this situation? And I said, just use your own poor judgment. She ran to the supervisor to complain, wanted me reported to HR. I goofed. So the supervisor wisely had the three of us sit down together, and I don't know if she ever forgave me. So I hadn't set up that I was going to use humor. We didn't have a history of using humor with each other, so I goofed. So when that happens, apologize quickly and sincerely. Lastly, the good, the bad, and the ugly. We can usually identify ugly humor when it's in front of us. Somebody's targeting a race, a gender, nationality, or a social class that's different from their own. And people will deflect any critique, any response, because they've been looking for applause or validation rather than laughing with somebody. They're laughing at somebody. So healthy humor is about playing with people and situations, not making fun of them per se. So when somebody uses ugly humor, there's something you can do. You don't necessarily have to challenge them. You don't need to unpack and explain to them why it was unkind. When you want to display some dismay, it's some ugly humor. It's very simple. You simply say, ouch. You don't need to say anything else. You don't need to have an argument with them. You don't need to keep trying to clarify. You simply say, ouch, and hopefully they will get the point. So to wrap up on the thought of humor, it is a very universal way of taking care of yourself and offering care to other people. I had the joy about 23 years ago of clowning in a hospital with Patch Adams. A movie was made about his life, and he and I did rounds at St. Alphonsus. And he talked at a conference about there was a famine in a country in Africa, and people were bringing food and water and helping those who were refugees. But he brought a troupe of 6 clowns and 4 cartons of whoopee cushions. And you may think, well, how is that going to help these refugees? He said it was amazing because they walked in the refugee camp with the tents and food and water was being distributed, and they used whoopee cushions with people. And as the whoopee cushions were used and demonstrated, they laughed uproariously, and the tribe tried to make him an honorary elder because of how he was able to bring humor in a way that they were all able to recognize. And I want to demonstrate something you can do to cultivate that self-care and ability to laugh at yourself. And I'm going to do that by having a volunteer join me up on the stage. And all of you who are at your computer screens and so on will be able to see us. And as we zoom out, you can see both Rick Bassett and myself. And I will demonstrate, and I'm going to stand in front of Rick and he'll be behind me. And I'm going to ask you, Rick, to do what I do. Have I had you do this before?
I'm just getting behind you.
Okay. Behind me, supportively, like I trust that. Have I done this with you before?
I don't think so.
Okay, so I will demonstrate, then you copy me, and then everybody who's watching, including those in the room, are gonna mimic us. So everybody in the room, stand up, please. Okay? Trust. Learn to laugh at yourself. Okay, I'll do it. I'll ask Rick to copy me, then you copy both of us. You count out loud. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You got it? Here we go. No, wait till I tell you, but you got it.
Simon says.
Follow me now, okay? Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, everybody in the room does it with their right hand, counting out loud to 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Any questions?
No.
Now we do the left hand. I'll demonstrate. He'll copy me. Then you all mimic the two of us. Left hand, counting out loud. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Halfway up, all the way up, all the way down. Ready? Do it with me.
Okay.
Counting out loud twice through.
Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, everybody in the room now, do it with us twice through. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Any questions people want to offer in the chat or in the room? Do you need any clarity?
I'm afraid what's next.
Well, you see, this is about learning to laugh at yourself. This isn't when you all laugh at Rick.
Well, yes, it is.
Okay. Combining them is going to use a different part of your brain. And I've learned to do this when I've had a rough day. And I practice this to get me into a different mind space. So I'll start out slow. Remember, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, up and down. The left one's partial up, and then down all the way. Okay, we'll start slow. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2. How's he doing?
Good.
Yeah, okay. My back's to you, so I can't tell.
That's a good
Okay,
thing.
a little slower maybe. But just remember, the right hand is automatic. Okay, here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You know, you all can't see the people in the room, but they're flailing and going 6, 6, as if, so good sport. Okay, here's your prize. The dressing change. So
Don't sit on this.
if you want to do self-care, you want to laugh at yourself, you can do that, like in a cafeteria or at the mall or something, and other will join you in the laughter. So those are my key points. What are your questions? Something I can respond to. I know we have a couple minutes, so unless you've all tapped out, I want to hear some thoughts, or you were maybe hoping for something else.
Alex, maybe you could speak to the role of humor in meditation.
Meditation. All I can think is about laughing at oneself and being gentle with yourself, because when you meditate, your mind often goes a lot of different directions, and you can be trained to let your mind go those places rather than berate yourself. Run with it for a bit and then try and get centered again. Can you think of any way in which those are overlapping? He's shaking his head. Yeah, I don't know how humor and meditation might go together, because meditation is often considered a more centering, important pursuit in a way that's different than humor. But maybe you can play with meditation and be playful with it. And like I said, be gentle with yourself when it doesn't come easily.
Maybe, sometimes in meditation, you repeat the same thing over again. Maybe the way to combine those would be repeating the Abbott and Costello skit.
Oh, right. And we can use humor in therapeutic settings. I don't know how much more time we have. A couple of minutes at least? Okay, good. I'll tell you a story about using humor therapeutically. And when you do that and you get a sense of connection with a person, that's good for your self-care, because you're being effective in a way that's appreciated with some immediacy. Chaplaincy, you don't necessarily know if you're impacting somebody in a positive way. You're normally called to something where there's dying and crying and sadness, and for them to thank you or say they feel better isn't what we're about. They'll often feel worse because they've named something that they've been trying to keep at arm's length. It may be cathartic, but it may not feel good in the immediate situation. But I was visiting a psychiatric patient, 21 years old, an inpatient who had a psychotic break. They diagnosed that he had schizoaffective disorder, was very disturbed, and the medication was helping, and he was a person of faith. And we would spend time together twice a week. And he said to me, I keep getting these thought insertion of wanting to kill my grandmother and other disturbing things. And I'm not sure if all that is because of the disease or if it's an attack from Satan, from the enemy, because I keep getting the thought, Satan reigns, Satan reigns. And tears are going down his cheeks. And I took his hand and I said, you need to have some kind of response to these thoughts, rather than have them totally dominate your thinking. Next time you get the thought, Satan reigns, say out loud, Satan snows. Or Satan's partly cloudy with clearing toward evening, or some other meteorological thing, because whether it's the disease or it's the enemy, doesn't make a difference. You need to be able to deflect it and play with it so it has less power over your life. And a smile tugged at his face, and he said, I'll work on that. And we got together again 3 days later, and he'd written down, after watching weather reports, all the other meteorological things that he could respond to when he had those thoughts. And he said, instead of me thinking about the thought Satan reigns, I'm thinking about everything else that's meteorological or weather related. And I end up laughing. And I said, well, whether it's the disease or it's the enemy, one thing I have read is that Satan doesn't like being laughed at. Satan wants to be taken seriously. So if you can laugh at him, the next thing you know, he's going to bail. So if you can keep laughing, that may give you some power over that challenge in your life. If there are no further comments, ending early, I'm sure, is not an issue. So thank you for being attentive and spending some time in the whole day and then closing with me.
I got a good laugh watching
Rick?
Rick trying to do that. I mean, I didn't even attempt, I'll be honest. Very good stuff, Alex. We appreciate your humor and the message today. Certainly and I agree with you, if we're not 100% and our battery's not charged, how can we turn around and give 100% to our patients and
Yep.
and clients? So very cool. Yep. So we're going to go ahead and almost end today. We do have one more session in which we will hear about how to get our CEUs. So really important. Go ahead and log when we close this session. Go ahead and log into that last one, and we'll learn how to make sure that you guys are getting credit for the time that you've spent today during the conference. So Alex, thanks again, and we'll see you in the next session, everybody.